Uh, Welcome to Zen Theatre Live. We begin by simply listening. Slow down just a little bit and see just how peaceful today can be. I was going to skip the Dune intro this time just because I wanted to tell a joke that I heard once. So there's this whale and a copepod. If you know what a sea monkey is, it's kind of like a very tiny shrimp crustacean thing. Now the whale's swimming along, about to eat all these shrimp, all these copepods, and this copepod. And to protect itself from getting eaten, it hides in a cavity in the whale's tooth. And to express its dissatisfaction with the whole situation, it whaps the nerve of the tooth, and the whale says, "Ow." Now they're at an impasse. They get to an arrangement, not that either of them have much of a choice. The copepod lives in the cavity of the tooth for as a result of living there, he's able to keep the cavity clean, uninfected, and in return he doesn't get eaten. And this goes on for several months until one day, looking out the mouth of the whale, the copepod says, "Oh, these shrimp, these copepods that are about to get eaten, these are my friends and relatives. I'm home." To escape the mouth of the whale, it hits that nerve one more time. When the whale says, "Ow," it bolts for freedom. And it escapes. And later on, it's sitting with its friends and relatives, telling stories about its adventures, and one of them says to him, "You were trapped inside that whale's mouth for 3 months? That's horrible. You were that whale's slave." And the copepod says, "Actually, no. It didn't feel so bad. I never really felt like a slave. I felt more like an indentured servant." Anyways, so this is Dracula, chapter 23, and I'm going to play a little game too. I was in the mood for some Dracula, so this will be a low-key one, you know, nothing too crazy awesome or anything, but I'm going to do some Street Fighter V, and I really want to listen to some Dracula, so you're welcome to join me, and here we go, or in the words of Shakira, Lego.
Chapter 23 of Dracula by Bram Stoker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 23. Dr. Seward's Diary. 3rd of October. The time seemed terrible long whilst we were waiting for the coming of Godalming and Quincey Morris. The professor tried to keep our minds active by using them all the time. I could see his beneficent purpose by the side glances which he threw from time to time at Harker. The poor fellow is overwhelmed in a misery that is appalling to see.
Hashtag beneficent
Last night he
purpose.
was a frank, happy-looking man with strong, youthful face, full of energy, and with dark brown hair. Today he is a drawn, haggard old man whose white hair matches well with the hollow, burning eyes and grief-written lines of his face. His energy is still intact. In fact, he is like a living flame. This may yet be his salvation, for if all go well, it will tide him over the despairing period. He will then, in a kind of way, wake again to the realities of life. Poor fellow, I thought my own trouble was bad enough, but his... The professor knows this well enough and is doing his best to keep his mind active. What he has been saying was, under the circumstances, of absorbing interest. So well as I can remember, here it is. I have studied over and over again since they came into my hands all the papers relating to this monster, and the more I have studied, the greater seems the necessity to utterly stamp him out.
Good luck.
All
have fun.
through there are signs of his advance, not only
May the
of
hand
his
of
power,
baby Jesus
but of
be
his
with
knowledge
you.
of it. As I learned from the researches of my friend Arminus of Budapest, he was in life a most wonderful man, soldier, statesman, and alchemist, which latter was the highest development of the science knowledge of his time. He had a mighty brain, a learning beyond compare, and a heart that knew no fear and no remorse. He dared even to attend the Scholomance, and there was no branch of knowledge of his time that he did not essay. Well, in him the brain powers survived the physical death, though it would seem that memory was not all complete. In some faculties of mind he has been and is only a child, but he is growing, and some things that were childish at the first are now of man's stature. He is experimenting and doing it well, and if it had not been that we have crossed his path, he would be yet. He may be yet if we fail, the father or furtherer of a new order of beings, whose road must lead through death, not life. Harker groaned and said, "And this is all a raid against my darling. But how is he experimenting? The knowledge may help us to defeat him." "He has all along, since his coming, been trying his power, slowly but surely. That big child brain of his is working. Well for us it is as yet a child brain, for had he dared at the first to attempt certain things, he would long ago have been beyond our power. However, he means to succeed, and a man who has centuries before him can afford to wait and go slow. Festina lente may well be his motto." "I fail to understand," said Harker wearily. "Oh, do be more plain to me. Perhaps grief and trouble are dulling my brain." The professor laid his hand tenderly on his shoulder as he spoke. "Ah, my child, I will be plain. Do you not see how, of late, this monster has been creeping into knowledge experimentally? How he has been making use of the zoophagous patient to effect his entry into friend John's home? For your vampire, though in all afterwards he can come when and how he will, must at the first make entry only when asked thereto by an inmate. But these are not his most important experiments. Do we not see how at the first all these so great boxes were moved by others? He knew not then, but that must be so. But all the time that so great child brain of his was growing, and he began to consider whether he might not himself move the box. So he began to help, and then, when he found that this be all right, he tried to move them all alone. And so he progress, and he scatter these graves of him, and none but he know where they are hidden. He may have intend to bury them deep in the ground, so that he only use them in the night, or at such time as he can change his form, they do him equal well, and none may know these are his hiding place. But, my child, do not despair, this knowledge come to him just too late. Already all of his lairs but one be sterilized as for him, and before the sunset this shall be so. Then he have no place where he can move and hide. I delayed this morning so that we might be sure. Is there not more at stake for us than for him? Then why we not be even more careful than him? By my clock it is 1 hour, and already, if all be well, friend Arthur and Quincy are on their way to us. Today is our day, and we must go sure, if slow, and lose no chance. See, there are 5 of us, when those absent ones return." Whilst he was speaking, we were startled by a knock at the hall door, the double postman's knock of the telegraph boy. We all moved out to the hall with one impulse, and Van Helsing, holding up his hand to us to keep silence, stepped to the door and opened it. The boy handed in a despatch. The professor closed the door again, and, after looking at the direction, opened it and read aloud. "Look out for D. He has just now, 12:45, come from Carfax hurriedly and hastened towards the south. He seems to be going the round, and may want to see you. Mina." There was a pause, broken by Jonathan Harker's voice. "Now, God be thanked, we shall soon meet." Van Helsing turned to him quickly and said, "God will act in his own way and time. Do not fear, and do not rejoice as yet, for what we wish for at the moment may be our undoings." "I care for nothing now," he answered hotly, "except to wipe out this brute from the face of creation. I would sell my soul to do it." "Oh, hush, hush, my child," said Van Helsing. "God does not purchase souls in this wise, and the devil, though he may purchase, does not keep faith. But God is merciful and just, and knows your pain and your devotion to that dear Madam Nina. Think you how her pain would be doubled did she but hear your wild words. Do not fear any of us. We are all devoted to this cause, and today shall see the end. The time is coming for action. Today this vampire is limit to the powers of man. Until sunset he may not change. It will take him time to arrive here. See, it is 20 minutes past 1, and there are yet some times before he can hither come, be he never so quick. What we must hope for is that my Lord Arthur and Quincy arrive first. About half an hour after we had received Mrs. Harker's telegram, there came a quiet, resolute knock at the hall door. It was just an ordinary knock,
Good game, sir.
such as is given hourly by thousands of gentlemen, but it made the professor's heart and mine beat loudly. We looked at each other, and together moved out into the hall. We each held ready to use our various armaments, the spiritual in the left hand, the mortal in the right. Van Helsing pulled back the latch, and, holding the door half open, stood back, having both hands ready for action. The gladness of our hearts must have shone upon our faces when on the step, close to the door, we saw Lord Godalming and Quincy Morris. They came quickly in and closed the door behind them, the former saying, as they moved along the hall, "It is all right. We found both places, 6 boxes in each, and we destroyed them all." "Destroyed?" asked the professor. "For him." We were silent for a minute, and then Quincy said, "There's nothing to do but to wait here. If, however, he doesn't turn up by 5 o'clock, we must start off, for
Good
it won't
round.
do to leave Mrs. Harker alone after sunset."
Who is this?
"He will be here before long
H-U-Y-Z-I-E.
now," said Van
Who's
Helsing,
he?
who had been consulting his pocketbook. "Nota bene, in Madame's telegram he went south from Carfax. That means he went to cross the river, and he could only do so at slack of tide, which should be something before 1 o'clock. That he went south has a meaning for us. He is as yet only suspicious, and he went from Carfax first to the place where he would suspect interference least. You must have been at Bermondsey only a short time before him. That he is not here already shows that he went to Mile End next. This took him some time, for he would then have to be carried over the river in some way. Believe me, my friends, we shall not have long to wait now. We should have ready some plan of attack, so that we may throw away no chance. Hush, there is no time now. Have all your arms. Be ready." He held up a warning hand as he spoke, for we could all hear a key softly inserted in the lock of the hall door. I could not but admire, even at such a moment, the way in which a dominant spirit asserted itself. In all our hunting parties and adventures in different parts of the world, Quincy Morris had always been the one to arrange the plan of action, and Arthur and I had been accustomed to obey him implicitly. Now the old habit seemed to be renewed instinctively. With a swift glance around the room, he at once laid out our plan of attack, and without speaking a word, with a gesture, placed us each in position. Van Helsing, Harker, and I were just behind the door, so that when it was opened the professor could guard it whilst we two stepped between the incomer and the door. Godalming behind, and Quincy in front stood just out of sight, ready to move in front of the window. We waited in a suspense that made the seconds pass with nightmare slowness. The slow, careful steps came along the hall. The Count was evidently prepared for some surprise. At least, he feared it. Suddenly, with a single bound, he leaped into the room, winning away past us before any of us could raise a hand to stay him. There was something so panther-like in the movement, something so unhuman, that it seemed to sober us all from the shock of his coming. The first to act was Harker, who, with a quick movement, threw himself before the door leading into the room in the front of the house. As the Count saw us, a horrible sort of snarl passed over his face, showing the eye-teeth long and pointed, but the evil smile as quickly passed into a cold stare of lion-like disdain. His expression again changed as, with a sudden impulse, we all advanced upon him. It was a pity that we had not some better organized plan of attack, for even at the moment I wondered what we were to do. I did not myself know whether our lethal weapons would avail us anything. Harker evidently meant to try the matter, for he had ready his great kukri knife, and made a fierce and sudden cut at him. The blow was a powerful one. Only the diabolical quickness of the Count's leap back saved him. A second less, and the trenchant blade had shorn through his heart. As it was, the point just cut the cloth of his coat, making a wide gap whence a bundle of banknotes and a stream of gold fell out. The expression of the Count's face was so hellish that for a moment I feared for Harker, though I saw him throw the terrible knife aloft again for another stroke. Instinctively I moved forward with a protective impulse, holding the crucifix and wafer in my left hand. I felt a mighty power fly along my